he is.
Where?
There.
What, behind the...
Conspiracy.
Is there?
Conspiracy.
You silly sod! What? You got us all worked up!
Well, that's no ordinary.
Magic card.
That's the most foul, cruel, and bad-tempered
Power outlier.
you ever set eyes on.
You tit! I saw my arm and I was so scared.
Look, that
Cards.
got a vicious streak a mile wide. It's a killer.
Get stuff.
He'll do you a treat, mate.
Oh, yeah? Manky Scots git.
I'm warning you.
What's he do? Nibble your bum?
He's got huge, sharp... he can leap about... Look at the bones! Look! Jesus Christ! I warned you.
I've done it again.
I warned you, but did you listen to me? Oh, no, you knew it all, didn't you? Oh, it's just a harmless little...
Conspiracy.
Well, it's always the same. I always tell them,
shut up!
do they listen to me?
Right.
Oh, no.
Woo-wee! Hello and welcome to another episode of Lucky Paper Radio. My name is Andy. I am here as always with my co-host Anthony, three-time 100 Ornithopter Trophy winner Maddox.
Is it only 3? I thought it was 4.
Do you have 4 trophies? You have 55 burgers, 55 fries.
55 burgers, 55 fries, 55
You have the
pies.
laser-etched one.
Uh-huh.
And you have the one that you did from Cube Cabin that is reminiscent of the 100 Ornithopter draft.
And your worst nightmare.
Oh, four-time
Four-time trophy.
4-time trophy winner of 100 Ornithopters. That makes you the second most winningest player in the history of 100 Ornithopters.
Behind Zach, I assume?
Behind Zach Barish, who this weekend upped his record lifetime to 15-0 in 100 Ornithopters. He has never lost a match.
Incredible.
And he has 5 trophies to his name. Yeah, it's a real situation.
And the not just number of trophies is impressive. Like, more impressive is the consistency. The fact that he has not dropped a match. How many games do you think he's lost in those matches?
A single-digit number, for
Single
sure.
digit?
Yeah, it's not many. He didn't lose any this weekend, I'll tell you that much.
Wow. What was happening this weekend that you were playing some Ornithopters?
I wasn't playing Ornithopters, but I was watching people play 100 Ornithopters at Cube for a Cause. This is Upkeep New York's biannual Cube event that is for charity.
I believe it should be. You know what? I think we can do better as a people.
Than having biannual mean both
biannual becoming meaningless. Like, we can actually improve and we can correct this. Biannual means every 2 years. Like a bicycle. It has 2 of the thing. So it is a semi-annual, like a semicircle, half of a circle. It's really easy. And I know that linguistics is descriptive, not prescriptive.
That's not what I'm going to say at all.
Okay, great.
I'm going to say a bicycle has 2 wheels and a year has 2 Upkeep New York events. Not
You're
part of
thinking
an
about
Upkeep
it
New York
backwards.
event. How is that backwards,
Every 6
though?
months, Upkeep New York has Cube for a Cause in New York.
Is that the better way to use that?
You know, it doesn't matter. You just got to explain yourself because we stop having words mean things.
Okay, but I'm hearing, I'm hearing the saltiness, the descriptive, prescriptive. Rewind the clock.
Okay, here we are.
The prescriptive way to describe something that happens twice a year is semi-annual.
Correct. That is the, quote, correct way to use those words if you were to ask a high school English teacher.
A high school English teacher who's burned out at their job, hates everyone they teach, and only cares about being right on weird little pedantic details, not actual usage. Interesting. I didn't know that. Well, semi-annual. But that's no more specific. I mean, if something gets weekly, it could also be semi-annual.
Wait, what?
Something that...
You're saying any fraction of a year is a semi?
I'm asking
no,
you.
No.
Semi only means in half?
You know what? I don't care anymore. I'm just burned out. I'm just tired.
No, I'm genuinely curious.
No,
semi just means a fraction of, right?
I think it's a half.
A semi is a half.
Yeah.
Like a semicircle always describes...
Semicircle is a half circle, exactly, yes. Otherwise, it would be a pizza slice, is the technical term for the shape you're thinking of.
Anthony, I love to learn. I love to broaden my horizons. Thank you for this opportunity to learn and grow something important today. On behalf of our audience, thank you for them as well.
I'm sure they all appreciate it.
This week, Anthony, I say I'm not sure how much we're going to have to talk about this, but I'm certain it will be plenty. but I want to talk about 100 Ornithopters because I think the time has come.
Uh-oh. What time has come?
I'll let you guess. What time do you think could have come for 100 Ornithopters?
Okay, times that can come for the 100
and if
Ornithopters.
you want to thumb through the cube, I'll pass you a stack so you can do that.
Sure. Give me a stack of cube.
This is a random stack of cube. It has nothing to do with the time that has come.
Is it time to unsleeve it? Are we done? Is it getting
no, I'm not
put up on
at
the
100
shelf?
altars, no. I think I'm at like 60. I'm not there.
Is it time to finally add a certain card or cut a certain card? Is it time to add 101st Ornithopter? Are you going to switch it to Memnites?
No, I'm not going to do that, but these are all good guesses. I say generously.
Is it, you got a battle flipped over here. I'm going to fix this for you.
It's time to cut a card, Anthony. You know what
time
card
to
it might
cut
be?
a card. Aura Shards. Is it time to cut Aura Shards?
No.
No. I give up.
It's time to cut Echoing Boon.
Really?
That's
sad.
I think it's time to cut Echoing Boon. For those that don't know, I will give you some background on this card in this cube. I mean, first of all, if you have not followed the show closely, 100 Ornithopters is my cube, where the only creatures in the entire cube are 100 copies of the card Ornithopter. There are no creature tokens. There's no creature lands. If you have a creature in play, it is an Ornithopter. That is how that cube works. And then there are also no win conditions that don't have something to do with Ornithopter. If you're making your opponent lose life or take damage, it will be through an Ornithopter fairly directly. Now, we're 60 drafts into this cube, roughly, in paper, and it's been drafted online, and there's been lots of clones that have had drafts as well. And from the beginning of this cube, the most powerful card has been Echoing Boon, which is a conspiracy, the only conspiracy included in the cube. And if you've listened to the show a lot before, you also know that we have talked somewhat at length about how conspiracies are incredibly broken in one-on-one Magic. I mean, the ones that matter. There are some conspiracies that refer to a specific card or something, but the ones we're talking about are just an effect you get every game, basically.
Yeah, do you want to read Echoing Boon?
I am going to read Echoing Boon. Echoing Boon says, conspiracy, hidden agenda. Start the game with this conspiracy face down in the command zone and secretly name a card. You may turn this conspiracy face up anytime and reveal the chosen name. No 100 Ornithopters, it only makes sense to name the card Ornithopter, and that's because the ability of this card says, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it targets a creature you control with the chosen name, you may copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy.
Conspiracies are pretty crazy because, like you said, it starts in the command zone. It's not a card that is in your deck that you have to draw. You just always get access to that effect. A lot of them are more broken than this in that they just change the fundamental deck building rules or let you cast things for free. So it's just your deck is always powered up. This one is a little bit different in that if you put it in your average cube, you would still need to name a specific card that you would still have to draw. But because you're always naming Ornithopters here, this is always affecting all of your creatures and giving you this huge, huge effect.
And, conspiracies were designed for the conspiracy set, which was a multiplayer set. The conspiracy was meant to be drafted and played with 4 players in a 4-player free-for-all. And it was meant to be best of 1. The idea was that each player would have a couple conspiracies, and that would kind of make everyone's deck a little better. And also, it was a free-for-all, so if you happen to have a really broken conspiracy, it would be, generally speaking, face up in the command zone, and your opponents would know about it, and therefore could compensate by, targeting you in the actual game. And if it was really broken, it was one game. It wasn't like you were playing, 6 games or 3 separate matches back to back with your same sort of broken card.
Right. I mean, until us Cube players got our hands on them, they were really just playable in these drafted formats of the conspiracy sets, and it's pretty casual. It's not like they were going to risk printing something that's super, super powerful that's going to break constructed formats.
This had no role in constructed, which meant that it could be kind of as broken as it wanted to be. And there's a lot of conspiracies that would make sense in 100 Ornithopters. There's, I think, one in every color at common that is a hidden agenda. There's a blue one that makes the named creature draw a card and hit your opponent. There's a green one that lets you pump them. There's a bunch of conspiracies that would make sense for this cube, and I was very picky the entire time and insisted that the only one I wanted to play was Echoing Boon because, unlike the other conspiracies, Echoing Boon does have a deck building cost. You can't just add Echoing Boon to any deck and have it do something. You need spells to target your Ornithopters. Otherwise, it doesn't do anything. So it rewards you for drafting around it in some way, even though it rewards you for drafting around it and always gives you that payoff, right? It's like having a really synergistic card in your deck, but you just always have access to it, as compared to something like one of the other hidden agendas that just says, all your Ornithopters are better. You can put it in any deck. You'd always sort of take this really highly no matter what you were doing, which kind of felt like forced picks to me and weren't that exciting. I have been an Echoing Boon apologist since the beginning days of this cube.
Why is that? Because you don't play conspiracies in any of your other cubes. I feel like it's a card type for a lot of reasons, partly power level, partly them just operating in a totally different way. I think as normal Magic cards as part of of your concern. Why here in this cube where you're already doing some like pretty niche weird stuff did you choose to also do this weird thing of including this card type that isn't super familiar to a lot of people?
Well, first of all, something about this cube gives me a slightly higher tolerance for weird, exceptional cards. So, for example, I have an uncard in this cube. For a long time, I had a Mystery Booster playtest card in this cube.
Until they just printed that card.
until we just in black border printed that card much better in form of Tempest Technique. I think this is a cube that, for me, for whatever reason, feels appropriate to sort of show the breadth of what Magic is, rather than being sort of more confined to a more sort of normal Magic lens. Now, I should say the uncard that I have in the cube is completely printable in black border Magic. I believe it's technically only an uncard because it refers to your teammates. I'm talking about Organ Harvest, the black sorcery. It doesn't have anything about it that's actually silver bordered in terms of rules. And like I said, the other Mystery Booster playtest card that I played was also very printable in black border Magic. So printable they in fact did print it in Tempest Technique. So it's not like I'm playing really goofy stuff, but aesthetically, what I'm saying is I don't mind cards being a little odd. And so that's one reason why I'm okay with it here. The biggest reason, though, that I have been an defender of this card in this cube is that it's really, really cool. I think people's first thoughts when they see 100 Ornithopters is like, okay, I'm going to have some permanent in play that makes my Ornithopters bigger, like some Anthem effect, or I'm going to have some card that puts, plus and plus one counters on every single turn. I'm going to have to like build this sort of engine to like make my Ornithopters big. And the thing that Echoing Boon allows you to do in this cube is just play combat tricks with your Ornithopters. And it turns a Reckless Charge into very likely just 6 damage to your opponent's face, right? Now they might have blockers and stuff, but the way it plays out is very likely a Reckless Charge. It's just going to be 6 damage to your opponent's face. In doing so, it makes a whole class of cards and really a whole deck viable where I previously thought it otherwise would not be even remotely viable. And there'd be no reason to ever put a Berserk, Fists of Flame, Reckless Charge, maybe even a Scale Up in your deck. I mean, Scale Up has the Overload mode, which makes it quite good. I mean, really, honestly, over the lifespan of this cube, I have cut almost all the cards that are really just there for that deck and tried as much as possible to include only cards that work alongside Echoing Boon, but also fit in other decks. Like I mentioned, Fist of Flame, which gives +1/+0 for each card you've drawn this turn and draws a card, and Trample.
And Trample is my favorite part of that.
Trample's really important, especially in this context, but I've seen that card used as a win condition for big combo decks, where it's like, I'm going to draw my deck, and then once I do, I will have drawn my deck, and I'll give one of my Ornithopters +22, +0, and Trample, and that's how I will kill you. So that card doesn't have to be in a deck where it's like, playing combat tricks. It can be used as a combo outlet. And I mentioned Scale Up, which turns either one creature into a 6/4 or all your creatures into 6/4s for either 1 mana or 6 mana respectively. And that can either be a really powerful combat trick, +6 power for 1 mana is kind of nuts, or it can be a just solid win condition, a 1 card you just cast and turn your whole board into threats and then swing in. I saw you pull a card out there. What was that?
I was just looking at Organ Harvest because you mentioned it, and I was. It has a really cool illustration.
Yeah, it's really...
no, too bad the artist who did it.
Oh wait, who's the artist?
Therese Nielsen.
Oh really? Ugh.
Yeah, I've actually had a chance to draft this deck. I think it was last year at Saltbox. I got Echoing Boon in like the first couple of picks, and then like Berserk is just nuts. And being able to cast a Scale Up and then a Berserk, or that Fist of Flame and then a Berserk was just really, really awesome. You'll never guess who took a match off me in that particular draft. I'm glad I got to do it once, considering it's getting cut.
Well, so let's talk about that, because the reason I have been a defender of this card for so long is that it is cool. The deck it enables is cool, and I thought for the longest time it was the best card in the cube, and I think Zach Barish, prior to this weekend, said he had it in his top 3 or top 5. He opened it pack 2 pick 1 this weekend. At the end of his draft, he was like, no, it's number 1. You're right. It's the most broken card. And it's really tough, I think, to put any card like a Conspiracy alongside a normal Magic card in terms of evaluating power level.
Yeah. I mean, in that draft, I remember specifically how difficult it was to deliberately retrain my brain, because I would look at a card and be like, okay, well, this is pretty good with Echoing Boon, and I'm so used to being like, okay, if I draw these 2 cards together, it's powerful, so, maybe that's like something to consider and bump up my evaluation of this card a little bit, and trying to retrain the way I was thinking and being like, no, it always has the Echoing Boon effect. Like, if I draft Fists of Flames, it is just a 2 mana draw 2 every single time. Like, there's no way to counter it.
Well, you can remove the creature.
You can change the targets, right? So it's like, yeah, I mean, sure, maybe you can counter it, but like, there is that extra text always stapled to it. You can't have your Conspiracy disenchanted. Like, there's no way for that effect to go away.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, I had Flusterstorm in this cube, and one of the reasons was specifically for Echoing Boon, because it's like, well...
I mean, that is cool.
Here's a way to counter, 2 copies of a spell, potentially, but I don't think it ever happened, basically. It ended up being just a narrow counter spell. I've actually been itching to cut this card for a little while, I'll be honest. And I'm ashamed to say that what has kept me from cutting it is all of the people that I know on YouTube are going to be like, "Heh, told you so." Like every time I post a Cube Update video to this, there's always like 2 commenters that are like, "Wake me up when he cuts Echoing Boon," and it's like, okay, fine, jerk, whatever.
So if you're one of those people, know that you have in fact had an effect.
I told them, I was like, you doing this makes me less likely to cut it. I've said that to them in the replies because I'm a hashtag poster. I'm doing the posting wars. It should cut it for a little while. And the biggest reason why, honestly, for me, is not that it's the most powerful card in the cube, because I do think, in terms of like the most powerful card in the cube, it is cool. It's really fun, right? And I think having this up there alongside Glimpse of Nature, Tolarian Academy, whatever you think the next most powerful card in Under Ornithopters is, I don't think it's insane. I will also say that when this cube is drafted with a table of new drafters, very often Echoing Boon does nothing. The players will not take it highly. They will think it is only for the sort of combat trick aggro deck. The player that has it in their sideboard will like not even mention that it's companion, even though I point out, there's actually 2 cards here that work with it, and they don't even think to do it.
That's funny. I've definitely seen that happen where it's like, somebody's like, I didn't really draft around it. This isn't important. And it's like, well, you have 2 incidental cards that it does work with. And it's like, yeah, I guess technically, but that's not part of my plan. And I'm like, again, it's that same kind of like, we're so trained to not think that way, but just being like, no, it is free. It's just this like extra bonus that costs you nothing. Put it in the command zone.
If I'm balancing this cube for like 8 people drafting it for the first time at like a cube event, like I think it's actually fine. Maybe there's a chance one of those people can like see through the matrix and get it, but I actually think it's most powerful in the hands of players that are really well seasoned with the cube, or at least well seasoned with this concept and understand how messed up conspiracies are. And that's not a lot of players that draft this cube. I'm telling you, like, people do not trust me if they're listening at home, but I'm telling you, I have seen this card do absolutely nothing and just be a complete nothing burger in so many drafts of this cube. So it is not that I'm cutting it because it has too high of a win rate. It's not that I'm cutting it because the deck is too powerful when it comes together, although it was definitely too powerful in that roto. That I would definitely not do again. I think I said that on the show. We did a rotisserie draft of this cube, and the pack one pick one was quite obviously Echoing Boon, and then once the player took Echoing Boon, everyone was like, well, they're in the Echoing Boon deck, and so none of us competed for any of the things that are good with that card, and it just kind of got out of hand. When you play 9 matches with a conspiracy, you really start to feel the power level of having that consistent access. So that was a mistake. But in terms of regular drafts, it is truly not a card that I think is problematic in a gameplay texture sense on average. And when a card is really broken in the hands of Zach Barish, get in line. There's a long list of cards in this cube that are really broken in the hands of Zach Barish. He also ended up with Glimpse of Nature, which, going into this draft, he thought was the best card in the cube. It was since supplanted by Echoing Boon. And we watched him make, Glimpse of Nature look incredibly broken and cracked, because it is, right? It's also a broken card. Why I'm cutting it is because of the constraints it places on me as the cube designer. I cannot tell you how many cards over the past couple years people have suggested, and I've said, that card's really cool. It is unfortunately utterly broken with Echoing Boon. I have had to exercise so much restraint in the cards I include because of the fear of the interaction with Echoing Boon, which, even with all that restraint, is still in the hands of a capable drafter, by far the best card in the cube. And what really pushed me over the edge was this weekend, one of the ways that Zach used it to its most devastating effect, which I have seen before. This was not new, but watching Zach do it in like all 3 matches back to back was with Maelstrom Pulse, where you can target your own Ornithopter with Maelstrom Pulse. Maelstrom Pulse, that copy of Maelstrom Pulse destroys all the Ornithopters. Then you get a second copy you can point at your opponent's most important non-Ornithopter permanent, which just turns Maelstrom Pulse into most of a pernicious deed, right? You just get to destroy all the Ornithopters, which is what the card does on its face, and then also destroy another thing, which is so powerful in that environment. And so it's like, I think I could continue to like tweak and dial in the cube, and maybe Echoing Boon is a little overtuned right now, and that means I should cut Maelstrom Pulse for just, another Abrupt Decay or style card like that can't, have that impact. But I'm at the point where I'd rather not play that game anymore and instead take that restriction off of me as the cube designer, not have to like think about every single card in the list and whether or not it's broken with Echoing Boon, and instead just let myself play those cards and not worry about it so much. It's like a sort of Damocles hanging over the cube at all times that I have to make sure not to put something in there that will make that thread snap and cause the card to become completely broken.
So are those cards that you've been avoiding, like, are they just like, oh, here's this like new really powerful combat trick, or is it more like cards that just incidentally have one target? I don't know if Sublime Epiphany exactly works, but like stuff where it's like, I end up just turning this into a draw 3 that also bounces something kind of cards.
It's mostly cards that are combat tricks that cantrip, essentially, which I think are already decent enough here, and when you get to double them, Like, Fist of Flame is the one that got in because it also does other stuff, right? I mentioned the sort of combo kill win, but there's lots of other cards in the Fist of Flame category that I would definitely include, if not for the fact that Echoing Boon, I think, would become crazy good with them. A great example is a card called Trash the Town. This is a spree card that's green. One of the modes is put 2+ and +1 counters on a creature you control. Another mode is whenever a creature you control deals
damage, you draw two cards.
Which, you know, with Echoing Boon is like pretty easily a draw for.
And that's been in the cube at some point, right?
It was in briefly, and it was utterly broken with Echoing Boon and had to come out. Like, it's just really, it's the shadow that Echoing Boon casts over the whole cube through access to this card consistently that is causing me to cut it. And you know what? I'm not even prepared to say sitting here today that I won't put it back in.
That's a great point, and I think a good thing to communicate to all cube designers is like, yeah, you want to be like, oh no, we're making this huge change and we're cutting this card that's kind of been beloved, but also maybe a little bit controversial, but like, yeah, you can always just put it back in. It's not a commitment. But it's interesting to me because I feel like some of those moments of like using cards in ways that are a little bit unexpected are some of the more interesting things you can do with Echoing Boon specifically. Like, I was just watching a couple games of Ornithopters last week and seeing a player who was pretty familiar with the cube, had drafted it before and was doing just like a hard control deck, but they had 2 or 3 incidental effects to go with their Echoing Boon, and one of them was Echoing Truth, which bounces a non-land permanent and all other things that share a name.
You can do the same trick as Maelstrom Pulse with that,
and just using that as, hey, I have 2 copies of this, I know you have a counterspell, can you counter both copies? And their opponent could not. Like, that was something that they had thought about in their deck building, and it was like a really cool way to use that card in a way that might be a little bit unexpected. Like, how is that not just upside?
Well, I mean, the answer is that it's happened so much that the novelty of that has worn off, right? And I think Zach is very low on drafting the kind of deck that absolutely maximizes Echoing Boon. Like, Zach does not want to play Berserk in his deck. He did actually play Fist of Flame in one of his decks, but he was doing the combo win where he would draw his whole deck with Jeskai Ascendancy and then kill with Fist of Flame. But he's not generally an aggro player. He likes playing what he calls combo control in that cube. And some of the best cards with Echoing Boon are the ones you mentioned, like Echoing Truth, Maelstrom Pulse. Your opponent holds up a counterspell to protect their board state, and then you just get 2 copies of Destroy All Ornithopters. And it's like, all right, great. Well, glad that card in your sideboard that is ostensibly meant to make Berserk really good actually also just, you know, made your removal spell effectively uncounterable, right?
Yeah, and that is kind of a funny twist because I've played both. I've played both of those decks where it's like drafting the 100% all-in Berserk deck was a lot of fun, but I did lose against the player, against Zach, who had just tons of interaction and could wait for just the right moment to, you know, use his life total as a resource and then bounce my one Ornithopter when it really mattered. And my deck felt kind of like tissue paper against him.
And you had Echoing Boon in that draft, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Which is to point out again, like, I also don't think his card is unbeatable. Like, I think you can also play around it and beat it. Like, it's not that even in the hands of a very skilled player like you who's played the cube before, it becomes unbeatable. It's truly this sort of impact it has on my card selection as a designer that is a limitation here. And, you know, there's 2 things that make me really sad about this. One is I do have a really sick altered copy of Echoing Boon made by Pringles Man, who painted a little scroll, little piece of paper. It's painted on. Who painted a little piece of paper like on the art that just says Ornithopter because you only ever name Ornithopter with it. So this will obviously go in my my binder of treasured magic cards, and it'll be a little sad not to play with that anymore. And this also plays a very sort of prominent role in the Ristic Studies video about this cube. And, you know, there have been a couple cards that are mentioned in that video I've already cut, but it's definitely the sort of most obvious change from this list now from when the video was made, which I do think that a lot of people that will play this at an event will not follow me, will not follow the show, will not know that I've made changes to the cube, and will just have seen that video, and maybe they'll be looking for Echoing Boon because they saw it in the video, and now it won't be there. Those are my 2 sort of actual, you know, regrets or hesitations about cutting the card now. The last thing I mentioned is we mentioned cards that are just really good with this effect that are not, you know, combat tricks or whatever. I think 2 of the cards that are actually best with this effect are Repeal and Twisted Image, which are both 1 mana blue spells that just all of a sudden draw you 2 cards with Echoing Boon and also incidentally disrupt your opponent. If you're willing to throw away an Ornithopter, Twisted Image, or bounce one back to your hand to repeal, you get to kill an Ornithopter or bounce your opponent's Ornithopter and draw 2 cards with Echoing Boon, which is nuts. It's nuts for 1 blue mana, and it's quietly nuts. Like, it's not like, well, the game's over now. It's like, oh, geez, that was a ton of advantage. One of the games we watched on coverage, Zach mulled to 5, and then in the first 2 turns of the game, or 3 turns of the game, repealed to draw 2 cards, and Fist of Flame to draw 2 cards because there's Echoing Boon, and all of a sudden had more cards in hand than his opponent after mulling to 5. The comeback potential of those sort of small cards becoming 2-for-1s is is a lot.
That was sort of the second half of my thought was I've also played it in that kind of hard control style deck, and those specific 2 cards that you mentioned, Twisted Image and Repeal, just felt nuts. And it was like, yeah, my deck is not all about this, but upgrading 2 of my cards to 1 mana draw 2s that also had other sort of implications and things that they could do was extremely, extremely quietly powerful.
Yeah, I mean, Zach had Glimpse of Nature in his deck, and that makes Repeal essentially a 1 mana draw 6, because you bounce the 2 Ornithopters, you draw 2 cards.
Yeah.
Those 2 Ornithopters are 2 cards that you then play and get 2 more cards. Maybe it's 1 minute draw 4 is a better way to put it, because the Ornithopters are drawing more cards. But either way, it's a crazy amount of value, and that's on a card that also can be interactive on your opponent. Like, it can also not be 4 mana Ornithopter at all. You can just repeal their 3 mana enchantment if you want for 4 mana. Like, that amount of flexibility is crazy. So, again, like, I think maybe I could shave Maelstrom Pulse for Abrupt Decay or something similar. Maybe I could cut either Twisted Image or Repeal and, just sub in a card that doesn't interact so powerfully with Echoing Boon specifically. But I love those cards. I love Twisted Image here. I love Repeal here. Maelstrom Pulse, I think, is a really flavorful, answer. I think it's a really cool board wipe that can also be not a board wipe, and it's really powerful to be able to have modality on that kind of effect. So I like those cards. They are as much the soul of 100 Ornithopters as I think Echoing Boon is. So I think it's time to try something new. Here's what I'm going to try, and I'm curious to hear your first reaction to this. I'm going to try cutting Echoing Boon for Leyline of Resonance, which is 2 red for an enchantment that provides the same effect, and it is a ley line, and so that means that if you begin the game with it in your opening hand, you can put it into play on turn 0.
It's interesting. I mean, it is like very similar, but it just is that tweak where like, yeah, it's free, but you have to actually draw it, so you're only going to have it one in so many games.
Also disenchantable, which
right.
which this is not.
Huge difference.
The other thing that, like, if I wanted to make more rules modifications, I would also strongly consider just saying, hey, look, if you start the game with Echoing Boon, you draw 1 fewer cards, right? That should count as a card at least. Like, it's an 8th card on top of being a non-interactive. It's something you get every single game. Like, so if you're got your own copy at home and you still like Echoing Boon and want to keep it, I mean, you can also not make any modifications based on what I'm saying. But if you like it and want to keep it and also found it to be a little bit too powerful, maybe try that rules modification. I certainly considered that, but I would rather change the cube than introduce rules modifications, because one of the things I'm most proud of about this cube is that it is just a cube. You just draft it normally. There are no rules modifications. There's no special anything. That's something I considered. But yeah, Leyline of Resonance, I think, is obviously so much worse, right? For so many reasons. Disenchantable. You do have to be in red because you don't want to have a card that you can only cast if you have it in your opening hand. You do want to be able to play it later on if you draw it, so it's color restricted. It's only free and on the first turn of the game if it's in your opening hand, and if so, you're down a card because it's one of the cards you drew for in your opening hand. However, there's a couple things that are appealing about this change. One is obviously Echoing Boon is quite powerful, and so cutting back on the power level is not the end of the world, right? That's one of the goals of this cut, certainly. So the fact that it's weaker is, not a bad thing. I also think that this will almost certainly not see play in the control decks that would otherwise use 1 or 2 spells like Repeal or Twisted Image to copy and get a lot of value off of, because you have to be in red and you have to commit a whole card slot to it. Like, your control deck doesn't want to draw Leyline of Resonance on turn 3 and have that be one of the cards that's in their deck they have to think about.
Or even in your opening hand a lot of the time.
Yeah, so I don't think it's going to see play in the control deck. I think it's a much brighter, louder signal for a sort of, I'll call it heroic. It's basically a heroic deck, right, that has spells that target your own creatures in 100 Ornithopters. The other thing is, with this sort of restriction lifted, with this sort of, big shadow of Echoing Boon cast over the cube lifted from me, I can now put cards in that are much better and, really strong alongside this effect that I think prior to cutting Echoing Boon would have been a bridge too far. I bring Trash the Town back. I'm going to add Impolite Entrance, which is just a 1 mana sorcery that gives a creature haste and trample and draws a card, which I think is quite good here. A couple of other sort of cantripping effects like that are going to come in to basically bolster that deck. And it joins Season of Growth, which is already here, which is a 2 mana enchantment that draws a card whenever you target a creature with a spell. It also has an effect that scries whenever a creature enters the battlefield, so it also lets you kind of, smooth your draws if you're going off with Glimpse of Nature or something. But Season of Growth has been quite good here, even when you're not in the Echoing Boon deck. And so I think Leyline of Resonance is going to be a little more focused. I think it's going to be like a C. Like, I think it's going to be a card that oftentimes does not see play, but when it does see play, might be a role player. But I'm optimistic that it means that this deck will not be dead in the water.
Yeah, I mean, it just really puts into perspective how powerful conspiracies are, because I'm looking at the ley line and I'm just like, well, it's okay if it's in my opening hand, but it still is then like I'm starting with 6 cards, and sure, maybe one of them gets doubled, but maybe not. And
right, you're not even equal on cards until you've doubled 2 things, right?
Right, exactly. So it's like, it's so much less powerful, and the fact that Echoing Boon is so it just costs so little.
It costs
It's just,
nothing.
I'm just like, look, comparing these two cards, and it really does just highlight that difference. Do you think Leyline of Resonance is going to get played often? Like you said, it's going to be in sideboards sometimes. I feel like it's going to be in sideboards a lot. Maybe I just don't.
We'll see.
Also have a lot of experience with ley lines. I just think they're not really a thing that gets put into a lot of cubes that I play. And part of that is just like how swingy they are. It's like, oh, okay, it's in your opening hand. You get 4 free mana and you have this like, now I can just go off with my cheap cantripping combat tricks like right away from the start of the game versus, oh, I drew it and now I have to wait 4 turns to be able to play it. Like that's such a swingy effect.
Something I really like about 100 Ornithopters is that I do think it rewards patience. One great example is Glimpse of Nature. I think new players to this cube are thrilled to have Glimpse of Nature in their opening hand, and they play it on turn 1 or 2, and they draw 3 to 5 cards, and they're like, sick, I did it. If you watch Zach Barish play with Glimpse of Nature, he never, ever plays it early. Ever, under any circumstances. Like, the card is basically a turn 10 card, and what he's going to do is he's going to play the 2 Ornithopters in his hand on turn 10, and then he's going to put them back in his hand with Hurkyl's Recall, and then he's going to play him again, and then he's going to, put him back in his hand one more time with Echoing Truth, and then he's going to play him again. Like, it is the kind of card that, even though it ostensibly could go off very early, actually rewards you, I think, for being patient and waiting for your moment. I actually don't think that, yes, it will be cool sometimes, and even more rare now that, like, some deck has Leyline in their opener and then gets to big combat trick Berserk and like kill on turn 2 or turn 3. It'll be very possible, much more rare, I think. But I think actually that same deck would maybe even be better off doing that exact same sequence on turn 5 when they also have a Snakeskin Veil up, right, to protect their threat, rather than going for it on turn 2 and just hoping your opponent has nothing. Because if that's a lethal sequence, it doesn't really matter when you do it, unless you think you're going to be dead before turn 5 or 6, which you probably aren't. I think just waiting until you draw sort of additional things is actually probably the way it's more likely to be played. So I'm not convinced of Leyline of Resonance, obviously. Like I said, I think it's going to be a C, but I do think it has potential. And one of the reasons I'm excited about it is it's going to let me add a card that I've wanted to try for a while that's semi-iconic that fits in this deck, and it's Blazing Shoal, which is X red for target creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn at instant speed. It's also arcane, but you can also free cast it by exiling a red card from your hand, which I'm excited about because this is a 4-mana red card. So if you don't have Leyline in your opening hand, maybe you use it later in the game to just, exile and free cast Blazing Shoal and get him for some free damage. I think Blazing Shoal being able to be free cast.
Classic pitches to force logic.
Yeah, it does pitch to force. Well, I mean, in this case,
pitches to Shoal.
Well, the thing about Shoal is that it cares about the mana value of the card. So it's not quite as the fallacy of pitches to force, because that's any blue card. But like this, you do want to have a higher mana value card. And so there's not a ton of those actually in the current version of the list, which means I need to add a couple more things to sort of support Blazing Shoal. But I'm excited about that because I do think being able to add a big combat trick to your Ornithopter at instant speed without committing mana with Blazing Shoal means that you can then have mana up for something like Legion Leadership and Berserk, right? And just like double that twice again. And that kind of sequence, I think, can still be quite powerful, because the other reason I like these spells in this cube is that we've also talked at length about how one of the strongest control strategies in this cube is just to play a ton of disenchants, right? Because so many decks are going to be relying on non-Ornithopter artifacts and enchantments in play to augment their Ornithopters, that let's just say they play Curse of Predation or a Tempered Steel or an Obelisk of Erd. If you can just disenchant that, then all their Ornithopters go back to being useless until they draw another thing. And then if you can disenchant that as well, then all their Ornithopters go back to being useless again. It's a really good way to generate a lot of virtual card advantage by just continuing to make their Ornithopters useless by answering the only things that make them not useless. I highly value cards in this cube that cannot be disenchanted, that present win conditions, right? That make disenchants look bad in your opponent's hand. I have a lot of sorcery speed disenchants right now. Those are all do nothing against these combat tricks, and it feels pretty bad to rip an instant speed disenchant on an Ornithopter. You will in a pinch if you're going to literally die, but I think in general that's not how you want to be using your disenchants in that control deck. So I think this deck might still have an identity and have a place. It'll kind of be a combo aggro deck, potentially, with some cards that I have excluded up until now. We'll bring back, now that Echoing Boon is gone, your Trash the Towns, your Impolite Entrances. But some of the ones I'm most excited about are, actually, they're sitting right here. Zhalfirin's Shapecraft and Suit Up. These are really great cards that, for a really low amount of mana, Suit Up is what, 3, right? To make something into a 4/5, and Zhalfirin's Shapecraft is 2 mana to make something into a 4/3.
And importantly, draw cards.
Yeah, so, they're cantrips, and they're both instant speed cards that basically turn your Ornithopters into real damage. One of these was in here for a long time with Echoing Boon, and it was truly messed up. Truly not okay to, spend 2 mana, deal 8 damage to your opponent, and draw 2 cards. That was was not okay.
Is there also an aspect, like, I think some players will look at Echoing Boon and just be like, oh, that's, like, not a real Magic card. This feels kind of out of bounds, and I'm just losing because you have this ridiculous conspiracy. Do you think it feels in some way more fair to some players to have, like, a ley line that is more within the bounds of normal Magic?
Yeah, I will say that I think there's an interesting curve of players that complain about Echoing Boon, right? If you are not experienced with conspiracies at all, maybe you're a less than franchise player, you are likely to not care at all how you lost. You don't pay attention to the fact that you lost to Echoing Boon. It's not really on your radar. You're just like, yeah, my opponent's better than me. I lost. If you are a slightly better player, but not a great player, those are the people I think complain about Echoing Boon. They're like, this card was broken. I can't beat it. Wah, 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 wah. And yes, you know who you are. If you are a great player, the great players have never complained to me about Echoing Boon. Zach Barish never complained about Echoing Boon. I actually apologize to the person that Zach Barish beat in the finals on coverage. Her name is Rourke. She's a fantastic New York player, really skilled. I was like, sorry about Echoing Boon. That's kind of, a bridge too far. And she was like, no, I think it's totally reasonable. Like, I just didn't have outs. I drew kind of badly. Like, great players do not complain about it because I think they also see that it is still beatable. So
there's some sort of like reverse Dunning-Kruger curve here.
That's exactly what it is, where it's like, the people that are most vocal complaining about it are the ones that just are unwilling to reflect on their own game or draft and figure out how they could have possibly beat that card, because there are answers to it. There literally is no answers to it by design, but there are ways to build a deck that can beat it quite handily.
But I mean, it's also kind of just a matter of setting expectations. When you're very new to the game, you don't really have expectations, so it's hard to be disappointed. And when you're very skilled, you're going to pick up on all those details. When you're in the middle, it's like, I understand what a combat trick does, and then you see a conspiracy, and you're like, I don't get this. This is not a card type I've ever seen before. It's probably weird and bad. And then when that turns out not to be the case, it can be confusing.
I think no one's going to complain about Leyline of Resonance, to be frank. I don't think anyone's going to complain about that. I think when people go off with it, it's going to be, kind of like, wow, you did it. That's sick. Like, congratulations.
Right.
And it is going to be a lot rarer. So, yes, I guess in that sense, I will be cutting down on that. I don't rate that very highly as like a reason to cut the card or not. If people complain about everything, there's no stopping them. The number of cards people have told me I absolutely must cut from this cube is probably a dozen that people over the years have told me, how could you possibly have this cube with this card in it? So I don't listen to them ever.
I'm curious what those dozen cards are.
I could make a list, but probably not for this episode right now. Okay, I'll just tell you. Gaia's Cradle, Tolarian Academy, Aura Shards. I had someone tell me this about Fomori Vault. They were like, Fomori Vault's the best card in the cube.
And every time I then go read Fomori Vault, I'm like, somebody thinks this is great. And then I read it and I'm like, this? Her?
Is... Her? It is really useful in a long game, of which are pretty common in this cube. If you're stuck in kind of a like board stall situation and you're like, well, neither of us really have any action right now, Fomori Vault
I've never experienced that.
Fomori Vault is a pretty good way to break that stall. Aura Shards is a great example of a card that people have said many times, because when you lose to Aura Shards, it feels bad. But Aura Shards is a sorcery speed only broadcast disenchant that is imminently beatable. Not only can you just answer it, which happens quite a lot, you can also just overwhelm it. I still think back all the time to that game where you were playing a like Naya aggro deck. I was playing a Bant control deck. I played Aura Shards on turn 3. I played 4 Ornithopters, destroyed a couple of your Ornithopters, 2 of your artifacts and enchantments, augmenting them. On a future turn, I played Paradoxical Outcome, picked up those 4 Ornithopters, drew 4 cards.
So let me draw 4 cards, plus also draw 4 Vindicates.
Played them again, and I lost that game.
I was just thinking about that, and I was like, how did I win that game? It was like just nickel and diming a little bit of damage here and there. Yeah, I think also sandbagging a bunch of Ornithopters and having a Rite of Harmony in my deck.
Yeah, you played a Rite of Harmony and Showdown of the Skalds, and that just drew you as many cards as Paradoxical Outcome did, and replaced like the Ornithopters I killed with Aura Shards. You would also already drawn a card off of. Like, you just had good card advantage in your deck, and the Aura Shards deck can't necessarily beat that. So, long list of cards people have told me that I have to cut from this cube. Engineer Explosives, we've mentioned before, as a card that has to be cut. Like, I've heard it for all kinds of cards, but I don't listen to the haters,
Haters gonna hate.
Which is why I want to emphasize again, if you're a hater of Echoing Boon, I am not listening to you right now. I'm doing this of my own volition. This is me as an independent person making a decision that has nothing to do with you. In fact, you made me stubbornly want to keep it for longer than I would have had it already, which I'm actually embarrassed by. I wish I wasn't affected by it. I wish I didn't think about you at all, Don Draper style. But the reality is I think about how annoying you are and how I don't want you to feel like you're right.
Oh, no. Poor internet poster.
Plural. There's a lot of them.
I hope you're doing okay. Make yourself a nice sandwich, and that's what I think about when I think of a good day.
Don't show empathy for strangers on the internet. We're supposed to treat them as faceless, non-human entities. All right, can I share some cards I'm going to be adding and get your thought on this? And this is going to be some cards that have to do with Echoing Boon and some cards that don't have anything to do with Echoing Boon, but that are just cards I'm excited to add to this cube. First, I want to talk a little bit about the cards that I think are going to be in there to bolster this heroic style deck that I think will hopefully make Leyline of Resonance playable. In the list already, we have Scale Up, Reckless Charge, Berserk, Legion Leadership, and a swath of other sort of less big pump spells that will still be copied nonetheless. But those are the really big ones. Those are the things that like double power and toughness or provide a huge buff and give trample that like doubling them is like kind of nuts. I'm adding in the blue cantrip ones we just mentioned. There's also another one from Modern Horizons called Phantasmal Form, which is 3 mana to make 2 creatures a 3/3 until end of turn and draw a card. So another is just 6 damage for, 3 mana. Or if you have Leyline of Resonance out, 12 damage, draw 2 cards for 3 mana is kind of nuts.
So that doesn't work because Leyline also cares about a spell can only have one target to be copied.
Okay, so that's true. The way that Phantasmal Form will work is you have to choose to target the same one twice, and then the next copy you can choose to target 2.
Does that work?
It does work. I talked to Bones about this, actually.
Okay.
Because I was curious about Repulsive Mutation specifically. Repulsive Mutation is a new counterspell I added recently. It's X green-blue to put X +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature. Then you may counter up to 1 target spell unless its controller pays X, where X is the highest power among creatures you control. And Bones confirmed that with Leyline of Resonance, you can pay X for whatever. The first copy of Repulsive Mutation, you don't choose to counter the spell because you can't. If you target the spell, it has multiple targets. It doesn't get copied. The second copy, you are allowed to choose to counter the spell.
Interesting. So usually when you copy a spell, you can't choose modes, but
Correct.
you can change the number of targets?
You cannot choose modes, but this does not count as choosing a mode. This just counts as choosing targets.
I thought you couldn't choose a different number of targets. This is not interesting rules nuance, but...
I think to many of our listeners, it is very
Okay,
interesting
then
rules nuance.
I'm pretty sure you can't change the number of targets because, I know if you copy a Arc Lightning, if you do a 2 and a 1, you can copy it, but you still have to do a 2 and a 1 on the copy. You can't switch it to a 1/1/1.
I don't think that's true.
I think that is true. And here's where this podcast ends.
Nope. Here we go. Hold on.
Those also might be different instances, but they seem similar to me.
He did quote the rules line here, which I'm going to find. Okay. According to Bones, and this is specific to Repulsive Mutation and Leyline of Resonance, which I'll read the rule and you can decide if you think it applies to Arc Lightning. He said, you cannot change modes, but you can have new up to 1 target. Quote, Rule 707.10, to copy a spell, activated ability, or triggered ability means to put a copy of it onto the stack. A copy of a spell isn't cast, and a copy of an activated ability isn't activated. A copy of a spell or ability copies both the characteristics of the spell or the ability and the decisions made for it, including modes, targets, and value of X, and additional alternative costs. Oh, no, wait, no. What the hell is wrong with my brain? Is he literally just him saying no?
You said, can I do this? And he said no. And you said, great, glad we can do it.
What the hell is wrong with...
Then this was good to bring up.
What the hell is wrong with my brain? Wow, I feel crazy right now. I cannot believe that I read Bones' message explaining why you can't do it, and my brain processed it as, wow, you can do it. That's cool.
That's so cool. He said the thing I hoped and expected.
Well, he literally said, maybe you can have up to 1 new target, let me research. And I guess my brain was like, there it is. That's the answer.
No
not
problem.
this rule we quoted 2 seconds later.
Yeah. What did you respond? Did you respond in a way that was totally nonsensical, as if...
I thanked him. That's how I responded. So not a nonsensical response. So Phantasmal Form, yeah, maybe this actually is going to be just confusing to include with Leyline of Resonance in the cube.
There's a small valuable lesson here for cube designers that I think it is really good to look at your cube, think about the potential complexities and places where questions are going to come up, and make sure you understand the interactions, because it just makes a cube night go so much smoother when somebody's like, how does Earl of Squirrel work when my Voice of Resurgence is in combat? And it's like, well, Squirrel Link, I can explain that to you. It's helpful to have those in your back pocket.
Yeah, thanks for just rubbing it in my face. But yes, I do try to make an effort to know the sort of...
The effort was made.
At least common rules interactions in my own cubes for that exact reason. But yes, maybe Phantasmal Form does not make sense for that reason. But, I mean, you're mostly not going to have Leyline of Resonance in play when you cast it. And
I think that's accurate.
It just draws 1 additional card if you do have Leyline of Resonance, because you do just name 1 copy. You copy the spell, the second copy becomes... Yeah, anyway. I'm honestly a little bit, shell-shocked at my own brain right now. Because I was
we've
so
all been there.
certain... I was like, wow, that's so cool how that works. I'm glad I learned something, and I just literally read the completely wrong thing. Jesus. Terrifying stuff. Anyway, those are cards I'm excited to add for the Leyline of Resonance deck, and I do think that means, for what it's worth, that a lot of the best cards alongside Echoing Boon are blue, and I think a lot of the best cards alongside Leyline of Resonance are still going to be blue, and so I do think we'll see Repeal and Twisted Image used in similar ways, not necessarily in a control deck, just in a deck that is also playing an aggressive, suite of combat tricks, and also playing blue cards, and also playing, those spells as, cheap interaction that also draws cards.
Yeah, I mean, then it feels much more like a tempo deck, where you need that Twisted Image to clear blocker and the Repeal, same thing.
One card I'm excited to add that is pretty simple, but was going to be too messed up with Boon is Fangs of Colonia. It's 1 and a green for a sorcery. You put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, then double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature that had a +1/+1 counter put on it this way. Now, it's only worded that way because it also has Overload for 4 green. So for 2 mana, you put 2 counters on a creature, or potentially more if it already had counters on it. And for 6 mana, you put 2 counters on all your creatures. The doubling twice thing with Echoing Boon is kind of messed up. This, I think, will just be a good way to put a bunch of counters on your creatures in green. Absent that,
That is a weirdly worded card, but sure.
all the Overload cards are worded kind of weirdly for that reason. Here's one for you, Anthony. What do you think of Live Wire Lash? This is a equipment I have recommended a couple times for the regular cube.
Yeah, this
and
is a
you've
card that
said, that's
every
okay,
time I read
don't
it-
make any changes to the regular cube. The last time I changed it was in 2019. This is one I think is maybe kind of interesting here. It's 2 mana for an artifact equipment with equip 2. Equip creature gets +2/+0, which is very important in 100 Ornithopters because it makes the equipped Ornithopter lethal to unaugmented blockers. Equipment that only gives +1 power, I think, is generally speaking not good enough here unless it has some really powerful other text. The other text of this, though, is it also has whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell, this creature deals 2 damage to target creature or player, which makes all of your combat tricks deal 2 damage to it. It also becomes the target of, not is targeted by, so I believe, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, rules lawyers in the chat, this would count both copies of Leyline of Resonance because the copies do still have to name targets. They're not cast. It doesn't say cast a spell that targets, but it is just becomes the target of a spell. And the reason is because I brought this up in combination with Tempest Technique, which is the Storm Aura we aforementioned on this episode, and I believe all the copies of Tempest Technique would also trigger Live Wire Lash.
What's interesting to me about this card in the Ornithopter Cube, sorry, I shouldn't call it the Ornithopter Cube, I know that's disrespectful, in 100 Ornithopters.
Thank you.
Whereas we talked about this in the context of the regular cube, and yes, every time I look at it, I'm like, yeah, that does make sense, and then I forget about it, so I've put it over here in a text file. I'm going to save it as Livewire.
Did you put it in the text file that you also put the reminder to have me tell you what my idea for the episode was at the end of the episode that you never asked me for?
Literally, yes. Yep. It's
Okay,
it's going into dev/null.txt, and I'm saving it to my desktop. In the context of something like the regular cube, like 2 damage is a lot and is going to kill a lot of creatures in that context, so it's like a really powerful way to turn a bunch of things into removal spells. How often are you going to be pointing this at other Ornithopters, or do you expect that this is just a way to stack a bunch of damage that you're pointing at your opponent's face?
I think it's both. I think you might use it to clear the couple blockers if your opponent played like 1 or 2 jump blockers to like eat your massively equipped creature to make sure they don't take a bunch of damage, then that could be a way to do that. I also think you might just combo off and, play a big Tempest Technique while you have a Live Wire Lash already equipped and deal 10 or 12 damage to your opponent right away.
Sounds like fun.
I think it's promising. And the more cards that sort of support this deck, the more I think they all kind of, a rising tide lifts all ships. The more that there's more support for this deck, I think that all the cards get a little better just because the deck is a little more supported.
Yeah, I mean, I guess actually what is a little bit of a question for me about Live Wire Lash is you do have this kind of like A-B question with the spellcast kind of theme where you need enough Ornithopters and you want the cards that are going to pump them up. And this rewards you, but it's kind of like this third piece that I could see you getting into situations where it's like, okay, great, well, I drew all my Ornithopters and my Live Wire Lash, but not the third piece to my combo, so it's not doing enough.
Well, so at least it does something in that context, I will say. Like, there's also...
Just the power bump is still
something. The power
something.
bump is still something, right? Like, it's something your opponent will probably have to deal with. It also means that if they try and deal with the Ornithopter directly, your opponent will take 2 damage from their own spell, which is kind of cool.
Oh, right, because
it
this
triggers on your opponent's stuff, too.
Spells.
Which is a form of, like, ward, essentially, for your threat, which I think is pretty cool. And very importantly, for this cube, it says the creature deals 2 damage, not Live Wire Lash, so still very much that Ornithopter if it's killing you if you target it with a spell.
Good point. That's more of an aesthetic difference, but
it's very, very important.
Appreciate your attention to this detail.
I mentioned Blazing Shoal. I'm really excited to try Blazing Shoal because it's so splashy, and I wanted to include one other big high mana value red card. The high mana value red cards that are already in the cube. I have Embercleave, which is 6 mana as a red card. I also have Leave to Chance, which is a split card, which has a mana value of 6 and a color of red because it's red and white. So there's 2 6 mana value red spells already in the cube. I'm adding Leyline of Resonance, which is a 4 mana value red spell. And the other one I'm going to add is one I've also had in my maybe board for a long time that I think it's finally time to try. It's City on Fire, which is 5 red, 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 so 8 mana total for an enchantment. It has Convoke though, so much easier to actually cast if you're not just exiling it to Blazing Shoal. And it says if a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage instead. Now, The reason I've avoided cards like this largely in 100 Ornithopters is because of that disenchant control deck I just mentioned, right? The way that deck works is it deprives you of all of the ways to actually make your Ornithopters into threats and leaves you with just Ornithopters, and they do nothing on their own. And the thing about City on Fire is that it also does nothing on its own if you don't have something else to make your Ornithopters do damage. But if you do have one of those things, it goes crazy, right? Like, I'm imagining just convoking this with a Goblin Bombardment in play, and now your Goblin Bombardment is a bolt to your opponent's face. That's a crazy upgrade on that amount of damage. So I'm going to try that and see how that goes. I think it might have legs, and it's also another card for that Blazing Shoal Exile package. The Pitches to Blazing Shoal package.
This is a card I'm less excited about, but I think it's more just personal preference because it's the kind of card that I look at and I'm like, okay, even though it's got Convoke, there's just so much that it takes to make this card work. I'm just not going to put it in my deck. I'm not interested in playing this, but I know other people will play against me and I will just be like, well, now I lose. And that's it. This card is so stupid.
When you say it like that, it makes it sound like you think this is a really bad inclusion, which is fair if you think it is. You should say so.
I think it's a bad inclusion for me.
Because you know you'll never win with it because you'll never play it.
Because I will never play it.
But you expect to lose to it?
Yes, and there will be plenty of circumstances where my opponent will have it in their hand, and they'll be like, well, I can't cast this card now, or this card doesn't do anything on this board state, and they just won't play it.
And you won't know it's why you won?
I'm only going to know that it's good when it is really good, which is, the whole Overrun problem.
Is Overrun the most iconic version of that effect to you think? It makes sense. It's up there, I think.
Insurrection, maybe, is the better example.
Yeah, it's a very expensive card that you almost never cast. That's true.
Have you considered Insurrection?
It's so much mana, and it just steals their creatures.
Yes.
Which, in many decks, their creatures do nothing, because if they have their Obelisk of Erd or their, City on Fire or whatever in play, you steal it, you get all their 0/2s, but not the thing that made them bigger.
Yep.
You're like, yep, that's by design.
Sounds like fun.
Okay, well then, here's a question for you. Another card I'm considering is Lunar Frenzy, which is X red for an instant. Target creature you control gets +X/+O and gains first strike and trample till end of turn. This is just Fireball in this cube, basically. It is kind of similar to Blazing Shoal. Blazing Shoal, you can also just hard cast for X red red. It does not give trample, nor first strike, though I think that matters quite a bit less. Do you think you prefer a Lunar Frenzy in this cube for the sort of more even distribution of outcomes of playing it compared to a Blazing Shoal, which has some potentially really high upside, but the base case of casting it is quite a bit worse?
I kind of like Blazing Shoal more because I agree that the high highs of, I got to do this thing and then cast 2 cheap double power kind of effects is really exciting. Whereas Lunar Frenzy is just, I think the first strike does kind of matter, but it's more of an incremental value, I decidedly won this combat and I was able to trade up on resources. Yeah, I don't know. It's just not that exciting to me.
It's hard to imagine the first strike mattering because the first strike would save your creature in combat if it was going to trade. Ornithopters almost never trade. Usually they just get eaten if they're going to get eaten on account of their toughness being higher than their power the vast majority of the time. The exception being, something like a cranial plating. But if you have a giant cranial plating and you're swinging in and you're giving a thing trample and also buffing it, are you not just killing them? Who cares about the first strike damage? You're probably just killing them, right?
Sure, I see. Yeah, who knows?
I'm also probably going to add Slip Through Space, which is another card that I think is too good with Echoing Boon, but perfectly reasonable without it. Just a sorcery that gives a creature unblockable and draws a card. Another great way to, if you have a big buffed Ornithopter and they're using the Ornithopters as just ways to delay and gain life, you can drop this and get in for all that damage. I kind of want to play Shadow Rift, which is the same thing at instant speed, but it gives Shadow instead. I just think it's probably not worth the tiny little fraction of extra confusion because it's really hard to imagine the instant speed mattering on that effect.
But much cooler illustration.
So much cooler illustration, a much cooler card.
I think the instant speed matters a fair amount, but for different reasons, where it's just I have an opening hand that I just really need a land. I'm just going to cast this end of turn on my opponent's creature, is where that instant speed I think is going to matter.
Yeah, it does let you do that, which I guess you just wouldn't want to have to play out an Ornithopter to cast your own Slip Through Space. If they use a removal spell to fizzle your Slip Through Space that they wouldn't have been able to use on their turn, that just seems so rare. But it does mean that if you are just trying to cantrip through to hit your next land drop, it doesn't require you to put an Ornithopter in play to do so, which is something. Well, no, I guess your opponent has an Ornithopter. You can still cast a Slip Through Space. Can that target any creature or just creature you control? Target creature can't block this turn. I don't know. I'm ordered a copy of both, so I can decide which one I want to put in. I had to order all the cards today because I want to make sure they'll get here before Shoebox. I'm making this change before Shoebox, is what I should say. If you are listening to this episode, you should consider attending Shoebox in Minneapolis, St. Paul. There are still some passes available. It is, frankly, I think, the coolest selection of cubes any cube event has ever had, and that's just because Greg, the organizer, is one of the organizers, is incredibly plugged in to the cube world and is very aware of all the cool cubes that are out there on offer and very connected to get them all at the event. So check that out if you want to play 100 Ornithopters or other great cubes, and these changes will be in place before that event.
So there's a bunch of cards that you're excited to add. Are there also cards that you're cutting, like related to this change, or is it just like incidental that something's going to get cut here?
The stuff I'm cutting mostly has nothing to do with Echoing Boon, and we're already kind of at time for the episode, so I won't go into that in detail, but I will make a video about this batch of edits, so if you want to see me talk about specifically exactly what's going to happen, you should check the YouTube page probably around the time this episode comes out. I imagine that video will go up maybe a little later. The one card I'll say that I think might have to come out alongside Echoing Boon just because it's not good enough without it. And again, I did try as much as possible when Echoing Boon was in the cube, which it was in there for 2 years and 60 plus paper drafts, is I think Baby Reckless Charge. It's still a haste enabler. It still gives you haste twice off one card, but like it might just be better as impolite entrance basically, which I think is a little too good with Echoing Boon, but probably better than Reckless Charge without it. Like, the damage matters on Reckless Charge, but that is sorcery speed. So you have to give it the power before you attack, so it's much easier for it to just get chump blocked if they want, and not replacing itself is a big downside. So I'm thinking that'll be probably the only card that is part of the, like, Echoing Boon playable list that leaves with that change.
Such a classic, though.
It is a classic. It's a beautiful old card. But yeah, I think Impolite Entrance is what it's supposed to be. And I'm a little bummed to have to play Impolite Entrance over Expedite or Crimson Wisps, which are cards that give haste and draw a card, but
the trample.
Haste and trample is huge. So I think Impolite Entrance is definitely the right one mechanically, and it's just from a recent set, so pretty new. All right, real quick, fun little bonus bit here for the end of the podcast. The last card I'm adding, Anthony, I'm really curious to get your evaluation on this, is Time Sieve. This has nothing to do with Echoing Boon at all. But
is this the sack 5 artifacts to take an extra turn?
Correct. It is blue-black for an artifact. You tap it and sacrifice 5 artifacts to take an extra turn after this one. I have a lot of thoughts on this card because I've thought about it a lot for this cube and have heretofore not added it. What do you think about this card? What's your initial response?
I really like this card here for the specific reason of I think it's going to pull players in a very clear, very different direction. And I think a certain subset of players will really enjoy that kind of side quest of trying to build their Time Sieve deck. It does still require you to have some other win condition. It's not like it just wins the game on its own. I guess you've thought about it a lot. So are there a bunch of ways to be able to take infinite or at least like enough turns to just be able to win with some random 1/1 counter?
There's no combos with this card that go infinite, to my knowledge. I can't think of any, and I'd be surprised if there was some combination of cards
you don't
I was
have
missing.
Like a second Sunrise combo or something?
Well, the thing is, you only get to cast that once. You don't get to cast it every single turn.
Right, so you need also a way to get that back with your extra turns.
The thing that it does is it turns a lot of cards into time walks, right? Like, it turns, I think, a second Sunrise into a time walk. It turns a No Rest for the Wicked into a time walk. It turns a Echoing Return into a time walk. Like, it turns a lot of things into a time walk. The thing that has kept me from adding it for the longest time is that if you are sacrificing the Ornithopters to this, then you're likely actually not doing anything with them. You're not dealing any damage with them. So these cards are all a time walk, but on a board that is not threatening your opponent at all because you just used all your resources to take an extra turn and have no resources left to actually kill your opponent. The reason I'm adding it is because I recently, in my most recent edit, added one more card that triggers when your Ornithopters die as a win condition, and that's Grave Venerations, which says whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. That joins the ranks of the Meat Hook Massacre, and I'm also going to count Pia's Revolution here as cards that, those 3 cards I think are going to be your primary win conditions in like a Time Sieve combo deck because they all proc when you sacrifice those Ornithopters to the Time Sieve itself.
So it's not just about like, here's my combo where I'm going to find out how to take infinite or many, many turns. It's more about, I'm a sacrifice combo deck, and this is both a way to give me an extra turn, but also sacrifice a bunch of artifacts.
It's also a
bunch
sacrifice
of
outlet, which sometimes those decks are just like, I need a sacrifice outlet, right? Like, if you have a Skull Clamp, you need a sacrifice outlet to turn that Skull Clamp on, so that's going to matter quite a bit. Yeah, I'm really interested in that one. I think it's very, very cool, just impossibly cool. I don't think it's very good, but I think some players are maybe going to like see it and be inspired and go for it, so we'll see what happens there. All right, well, this has been a very detailed, in the weeds episode about one particular change to 100 Ornithopters, but to be honest, it's all I'm thinking about today, and so we were going to record, and I couldn't talk about anything else, Anthony. It's just the only thing that's on my mind, and there'll be one more big edit to this cube before Shoebox, and if you care to see all the details of the specific cards that are coming in and out, I will encourage you to check the YouTube channel where I've been recording little video vlogs of all my cube edits, which have been really well received. People seem to like them a lot, so check those out. There's a back catalog of those for 100 Ornithopter, for Sacred Geometry, for Take 5 especially, and yeah. Maybe we'll see you in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and you can play this cube there. If you want to send an email to the show, you can reach us at mail@luckypaper.co. If you want to send us... Mailbag, quick.
Mailbag.
Okay, we got this thing.
Mailbag stinger.
P.O. Box 4855, Baltimore, Maryland 21211. If you want to get something in the show, this is the best way to do it because it's physical mail, so we can't ignore it. We received Anthony what I can only describe as looks like the kind of note you'd be passed in middle school from somebody across the lane. It's just a piece of...
I disagree. This looks like a kind of note that some talented origami artist would create.
Okay, maybe a little generous. It's a piece of lined paper.
I'm willing to be generous here.
A piece of college-ruled lined paper that is folded up on itself and then just has a stamp and a name thrown on it, a to-address thrown on it. So I'm going to go ahead and unfold this now. We're going to see what this note says. It's from listener Tony. I'm not going to give your last name here, Tony. Let's see. Oh, gosh, it's so long. Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, dear. This is just a lovely note from listener Tony, who says that they really appreciate the show and also were especially inspired by my recent Take 5 Cube and have built their own sort of version and had a great time with their local playgroup with it. So thank you for the lovely note, Tony. Love getting messages like that.
And thank you for teaching us this incredible paper folding method.
This incredible origami artist, according to Anthony. Actually,
I think it's cool, and I think it's very impressive. I'm a little bit surprised that it came through the mail.
It did lose a corner, it looks like.
Just one.
But artistically, because it was folded over, so the corner made
beautiful
a little like
snowflake.
part of a snowflake. It's folded like a DSB delivery. That's how DSB delivers every piece of paper to anybody, is folded up in some sort of rectilinear,
Yeah. And
Yeah.
yes, Tony, we are best friends because we are Anthony's.
And on that bombshell, that's the end of this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. All the music for this show is produced by DJ James Nasty, and the show is edited by Matthew. All the magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast, and this podcast is produced by Thank You Really Hard About Magic Cards. I've been speaking to microphones about it. Anthony, thank you for the gift of friendship and for the gift of Cube.
Thank you for putting Echoing Boon into a cube long enough that I got a chance to win with it. Or lose with it. No, I did both.
You did
Great.
both.
Great. Full spectrum experience.